Welcome to Live Players, where political scientists and strategists Samo, Burja, and I discuss the key individuals with the power to alter our current society. Every week, we provide analysis of the news and case studies of live players as well as key institutions and technologies that make up the global power landscape. Let's dive in.
Maybe we start. We could talk about Palladium. Like, what do you? And then I'm sure a bunch of topics. So, yeah, what do you view as your kind of moonshot project with Palladium? Like, why did you take it over? What are you hoping to do with it? How do you kind of situate Palladium in the idea ecosystem?
I think that the modern Western intellectual and cultural space is basically severely deficient in unique idealistic projects. If you start listing them, so these are ideas that are not just meant to serve an existing audience, but rather to create and educate a new audience and create a community of thinkers, you're actually going to be maybe able to count 10, 20 recent projects that are, let's say, still piloted by a live player. They're trying to do something that doesn't just amount to, shifting like the left-right balance or promoting a particular vision of, what the future of technology could be to prove your fund's investment thesis. I'm not accusing you of this. I'm just, some VC colleagues certainly do this. But yeah, there are very few people pursuing these kind of purely intellectual community, cultural community building efforts. It's always kind of partially focused on some form of monetization or some form of political payoff. And I felt that Palladium Magazine, it was this unique effort founded by my friend Wolf Tivey in 2018. It has been going for many years. And the opportunity arose when Wolf basically, kind of retired to work on an interesting software project that maybe I'll have him on the show to talk about sometime and, travel across the country. I saw it a great opportunity to take up this institution, make sure it continues and survives. And I think it's very important that we pick things that we really believe in and support kind of for the community benefit, the public benefit. But also at the end of the day, I'm just starved for good things to read. I'm tired of always just like having my guys at Bismarck and myself like research stuff and write it. I want to read other smart people. And I was just constantly running into this view where I encounter these amazing people, super accomplished or smart, unique perspectives. They've never thought of writing. And if they wrote in their blog post, it actually wouldn't be taken as seriously as it is if it goes through full editorial review, et cetera, et cetera. So it became a very natural social fit for me. I still, of course, am relying on the other Palladium editors to a great extent. There's only so much you can do in a day. Already, CEO of Bismarck. So taking another basically executive or leadership role, it was an adjustment. I think I've not worked this hard since I founded Bismarck. I think the first 2 years when I founded Bismarck, I worked extremely hard. It was like true startup mode. And I feel I'm right back there for the last 6 months. And we just celebrated the successful launch of Palladium 15. We threw a great launch party. The launch parties aren't just about beautiful people being well-dressed and having glamorous.
Although there is plenty of that, I must say, from personal experience.
Of course. Lots of handsome men, beautiful women, etc. And, we're countercultural in the Bay. It's an excuse to dress formally. It's an excuse to elevate it. But look, the form is elevated and glamorous to glamorize thought and culture and the writers. I think it's not controversial if I point out that the Paris Review of Books, or the original New York literary scene, a lot of the reason that people would pursue literary cultural excellence was basically to show off to their friends and basically to be esteemed by people who understood the craft. And then great things were accomplished. And I think it's long overdue that we rewarded thinkers who are rethinking not just our technological future, but the social future that goes together with this future technology. And that's where, the tagline of Palladium Magazine that I inherit, but I endorse, is governance futurism. This idea of, it has many meanings. How should the future be governed? What is the future of governance? Does it look like governments? Does it look like network states? Does it look like cultures? Does it look like super distributed? Technology is transforming us all the time. And the answers that we inherited from the 20th century, and these are answers that aren't even like left or right. These are like discrete ideologies. It could be like, like in socialism, libertarianism. These are more specific things than left and right, even if they're left and right coded. And once you get deeper into it, it starts even losing left and right. It's like Gaianism. Like, what is the political valence of someone that believes the earth is a giant superorganism? Yet I guarantee you that someone like that had a role in writing, say, EU policy, or writing a script for a Hollywood movie about environmentalism or whatever. These are live players believe weird ass shit, right? And part of Palladium's mission is to write many different views that live players could have, because I view the beautiful overlap here in the ability to help people achieve greater agency over their technological future. Let's write analysis of the present, imagine what the future could be, write proposals for what the future could be. It might be things like intentional geoengineering by the great powers. Maybe that's something we should start thinking about. It might be people radically rethinking white collar work and being more willing to quit their jobs and pursue crazy projects. Look, Wolf wrote the article, Quit Your Job, talking about the previous job he quit to found Palladium Magazine. And now he's, probably reread his own article and was like, wow, this is like a mature cultural institution, a pillar of Bay Area social and intellectual life. Time to do something else, like time to reinvent forums or something like that, and to fix the noosphere, the space of all thinking that way. So it's sometimes personal philosophies for how to exist in this world. Other times it's observation, right? The issue 15, every single quarterly issue of Palladium Magazine has like a different theme topic, and the articles are focused there. They're supposed to be kind of these like timeless reflections, so they're not chasing the news cycle. Like, I think even as AI has developed massively since the release of last year's winter issue, Silicon Nemesis, the one that featured an interview with Grimes and articles by various people in AI, despite the massive technological changes in AI, I recently reread those articles. All the questions of worldview, society, politics that are raised there, still timely, did not age out. Or if we go even further back, issue 07, Garden Planet, that had an interview with Isabelle Boemke, the famous as the nuclear influencer, but also had interviews with Stuart Brand, who, if you know your history of environmentalism, is like this like legend that shaped several movements. It featured articles again on things like geoengineering, nuclear energy, what relationships should human societies have to natural ecosystems, right? None of those essays are dated. And, that's because constructing these new worldviews that fit the evidence and situation that we find ourselves in is a means of empowering people to change the present and change the future. I think like a lot of my friends in progress studies are sometimes mystified, why I seem to agree with them so much, but also disagree. And I think what I disagree is this vision they have of the automatic future, where every year, GDP goes up, GDP go up 1%, lifespan go up by 1 week, child mortality go down like 1,000th of a percentile. And that just keeps going. And no matter what we do or don't do, things are going to keep getting better, but they'll stay the same shape. We'll still have parliamentary democracy. We'll still have some form of capitalism. We'll probably have some form of welfare states, though maybe we shouldn't. And I'm like, well, no, actually, no. When the Industrial Revolution was a true revolution, feudalism was swept aside for real. Look, that's one thing the Marxists had right, okay? That's one of the things that, Karl Marx and Ayn Rand would agree on, that feudalism was swept aside by the gale of the technological change, together with the rise of a new class of people. Like, industrial capitalism happened, the bourgeoisie happened and expanded greatly. So I think thinking about it as, this was like purely a political revolutionary project of the 20th century neglects that all the foundations of the 20th century state, be it the United States of 1950, the Soviet Union of 1960, France of 1970, these are states that would have been totally intelligible and recognizable to Otto von Bismarck, to go for the namesake of my company. Actually, one of the reasons, by the way, I named Bismarck Analysis after Bismarck was because I realized, holy shit, the politics have really not changed that much in the fundamentals of political economy since like the 1870s. And this guy kind of like cracked the formula for how to go from like small fragmented states to like a large high state capacity country and do geopolitics super well. In a way, he invented the modern state, but no one really credits him for that. And he invented as a side effect the modern, like, mixed economy where you have like a big private sector, but you have national security stuff that somehow is super influential and develops key tech. But also you have these private research universities that receive some public money, but the scientists are kind of left alone to do what they want, et cetera, et cetera. That whole mix happened in the 1870s and should be credited to that time period. So before I go too far, I think that we are long overdue. We have a social technology overhang. And I hope that the thinkers, researchers, writers, and this includes artists like Grimes or Leibach, it includes philosophers like Slavoj Žižek or Christina Lamaru, they need to imagine true alternative ways society could be, because without these thought experiments and eventually practical social experiments, we are going to be operating on an ever more obsolete stack of social technology, and that will lead to bad outcomes. It might even lead to the end of progress, right? We might actually be reverting to a static society. And this is a topic we've talked about before. So I view this cultural work as very important, and I view it as a forum where my only requirement is that you say something new and that it makes logical sense, and the writers and that it is topical for the issues of the 21st century and beyond. And I think that can only be done in a nonprofit context. That can only be done in a non-partisan context. All the articles are not paywall. They are all available on the website, palladiummag.com. And the print, well, the print's not for sale, never will be. The print is a gift for the members who support it, and the quarterly launch parties, as well as we'll now be perhaps restarting some digital events and some things like lectures starting in 2025. That is where the members can meet each other and can strike up friendships and talk about these excellent things together, or talk about anything else they want, because that's part of how you maintain a scene. And I think that, I appreciate capitalism so much because I live in San Francisco, so do you. So obviously we're all chasing, there's a chasing of investments, there's a chasing of valuations, there's a good chasing of technical breakthroughs, of, successful software capitalism and computing capitalism, we could call it. But I think the culture stuff is underserved. Dude, why is Burning Man still the peak of cultural experience? That thing started in the 1990s, okay? I've seen the art from photos of my friends year after year. Dude, the art is stuck in 2010. Okay, they reached the thing, it matured, and now it's just doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah. So where's the next Burning Man? And I honestly think, maybe it now involves that suits are totally obsolete. Maybe now it involves putting on a suit or a glamorous dress and, making thought beautiful and keeping yourself elevated.
Yeah, no, I love that you guys do it really well.
Hey, everybody. Erik here with a word from our sponsors. The tech world turns to the Brave browser for its unbeatable privacy protections. But did you know that Brave also has a private ad platform? Brave Ads offers first-party targeting, and it's been cookieless since day one, so you can relax while third-party tracking cookies disappear from the web. Today, millions of people turn to ad blockers to avoid being tracked and pestered online. But Brave's new ad model aligns incentives for users and advertisers. Users earn rewards for viewing ads, which they can save, spend, or pass along to their favorite creators. And advertisers score points for respecting user privacy, generating ROI without invasive tracking. So whether it's high-impact announcements on the new tab page or keyword-targeted ads in Brave Search offers diverse, private, future-proof ad formats for all your business goals. Join the future of advertising at brave.com/ads. Mention Turpentine to get 25% off your first campaign.
One of the main ideas I seem to take from Palladium, or at least in sort of the original conception, was this sort of theme or this belief that we need elites who are not only competent, but also not embarrassed to be elites. maybe even proud to be elites and proud to demonstrate sort of the right ways of being or of operating, and that the sort of broad idea of governance futurism, or sort of like people who run stuff need to do a good job, need to be accountable, need to own that they're in charge.
I think that's definitely true, because many of the writers and certainly many of the editors feel that a lot of social change does happen through elites. It happens through government elites, political elites, economic elites. And I think our society has gone, okay, the reason that in our society, elites evade responsibility so often and don't do a good job is because we allow them to get away with claiming they're not elites. And why do they try to claim they're not elites? Well, because our only concept of an elite is a negative one, right? Elites are bad, they're extractive, they're exploitive, we don't want them, we don't need them, but we do, right? We do need them. And even if we try to get rid of them, they inevitably pop right back up. The historical record's super clear of this. I don't think we can name a single revolution in human history where the result was a society without elites. We can only name times and places where one elite was replaced by a different elite. And of course, sometimes replacing the elite's the right thing to do, right? Though, I'm not interested in revolution. I think they're risky business. I much prefer like kind of a gradual reform, refounding, rebuilding, evolution, and so on. But still, yeah, the whole project of imagining these new futures and delivering them and having people talk about them and organize around them, be inspired, start their own projects, that clearly is elite formation right there, right? We expect and hope our readers go and reshape the world along the lines of what they imagined, conceived, and debated with each other and read in Palladium articles that are in dialogue with each other. And the meetings and creating those meetings is also to be like, hey, this is okay. There can be a positive sum approach to doing all of this. I think what we also miss right now is that if we are forcing all elites to lie to us, they're just going to all lie to us. And then we will be, as the public, immensely confused about the world, as citizens, as consumers, as shareholders, honestly. So let us not incentivize them to lie to us. Let us instead incentivize them to pursue grand visions well for the public benefit. And then, yes, let's reward them. It's correct that Elon Musk has a huge fan base. Almost no matter what he's done politically, no matter what one thinks of it, the simple fact is that without this man, America would not have a working space program. That in itself outweighs so much. If you add on top of that, without this man, the electric car industry would be 10 years behind, and it would be completely Chinese, rather than China is like a tough challenger to Tesla right now, right? So really, like, that's such positive credit. He should have fanboys, okay? And, while we should critique them for having power, it's sort of like, I think it's much better if elites make their decisions in the open, in public, in dialogue with the public. Because at the end of the day, that's, first off, it's more meritocratic. You can fool the public for some of the time, but on the long run, if they get to see results, if you show them the results, they like what they like and they know what they like, right? So the substance does still have a small advantage over form, over propaganda. But the other part of it is, I think this results in a society with way more live players. We might have had this discussion with Rudyard either on camera or off camera, but one of my theses is that, the wonderful thing about the Roman Republic and ancient Greece was that because people were so clearly pursuing grand goals and ambitions, many more people were inspired to do so. There was more live players. There were more live players in that society. So as a meta point, I think talking and thinking about elites, both in the ways that they are failing, in the ways that they are succeeding, both in the United States and around the world, results in more people taking up this idea to reshape and repair society. And I really think that on net, we benefit immensely from there being more live players than not. And this also means we benefit immensely from there being more functional elites than non-functional elites, right? I know I went super deep into this, but it's just super integrated with my thinking.
No. To that end, I mean, if Palladium sort of achieves its goals or your goals for it, do you think that it's introducing new ideas? Is it like, what is success? Is there a modern institution that sort of is the North Star for what Palladium is trying to achieve? How do you think about, what the moonshot there is, or what success looks like?
Honestly, I think success looks like a revival of the Republic of Letters, where we are once more writing in dialogue with each other, not minding too much whether we get all the clicks or all the likes or all the Instagram impressions for our takes. Instead of takes, let us have true public discourse again. And to do that, you have to liberate it from clickbait. You have to liberate it from the paywall. And there's no real model. Substack is amazing, and I credit it for, reviving blogging. But I think that there's something to be said about like this complete public availability where people coming together and basically just for the sake of exploring a position, will create magazines. So I think victory, success, 10 years from now, it looks like people referencing particular Palladium articles inspiring them, right? Steve Jobs cited the whole Earth catalog in one of his speeches as a work that inspired him. I hope that the live players of 10 years from now, maybe they'll cite Wolf's Quit Your Job, or maybe a scientist will cite Ben Lindo Taylor's, The Culture of Academic Fraud. And they're going to say, and that's why I went straight to Patrick Collison and asked him to fund my research, and I didn't bother doing it in university. And that's how I won my Nobel Prize, right? Like those are successes, number one. But number two, the social technology of a philosophical cultural journal that is not the elevation of the writers for their own sake, but an active organ co-creating society is revived in our era. So it's rescued from this prison of the 18th century, and you will have other Palladiums pop up. You will have other nonprofits or for-profits, maybe, that they're not going to be profit maximizing, because it's impossible to do that with a magazine. We're going to have thoughtful philosophical editors curating a focused discourse on a few common assumptions, like the one you identified about the importance of functional, responsive, noble elites versus parasitical, extractive ones that Palladium certainly has, or the other thesis that, our social technology stack is obsolete and needs updating because the technology has changed and because our society has undergone immense changes since the 20th century architecture, which is secretly just the late 19th century architecture of a modern state. So the other success is there'll be competitors, right? Success doesn't look like, Palladium certainly would be and will be one of the most respected intellectual publications in the United States, but success doesn't look like a monopoly. It doesn't look like how the New York Times, everyone's reading the New York Times now, while the other legacy newspapers are dying. It looks the opposite. It looks that, while there might be Palladium reading groups in every city, there will be other interesting publications, right? And, those publications will be pursuing their philosophies, right? I'd be extremely happy if, say, for example, the Long Now Foundation has a publication, if that publication achieved that depth of cultural influence. That would be amazing. It would be amazing if someone took a fresh look at Bay Area countercultures. And then the final sort of prong of this success is it's undeniable we're a Bay Area thing. We are a San Francisco-based publication. And it's undeniable that we are reaping the cognitive surplus that exists here for people who are, excellent software engineers, excellent entrepreneurs, but really they like thinking about everything. They just haven't had an opening to write about that, to talk about that. And in a way, it's breaking open this old media cartel of the East Coast and replacing it with a new West Coast thing. And I think that would be another sign of success if people thought of San Francisco as a great literary and intellectual city, not just a city of startups and Silicon Valley.
Yeah. It does feel like we're at a bit of a intellectual renaissance in San Francisco or in technology more broadly. One in the sense of we now have, and it shows in a few different ways. We now have more political diversity, right? More intellectual diversity. Everyone in 2016, if you supported Trump, you were, outcasted. And that, I'm not saying that it was necessarily the right pick, but it's just evidenced of a lack of diversity. And also, there was intellectual community in the 2010s, right? The Less Wrong, the sort of that EA community, but it was isolated and siloed in these forums. It didn't really participate with the broader ecosystem. And now it is, right? Palladium, Pirate Wires, Turpentine, all sorts of different individuals and organizations who are trying to tell tech story from, or interact with the broader world. So there does feel to be a bit of a renaissance there.
I think it certainly is the case, because I think people feel a little bit liberated and freer to speak their mind. And many of them are also just grappling with these pretty existential questions, because a lot of the ideals of Silicon Valley, of openness and so on, have hit political and economic limits. And some of those ideals are in fact under threat in very fundamental ways, right? Consider all these fights about, copyright, or these fights about censorship. These were brewing for a long time. They just became impossible to ignore. And part of this discourse opening up is because the social contradictions became too difficult to paper over with valuations, right? Like in 2012, it was easy to be like, just ignore politics. Obama has our back. He likes tech. It doesn't matter if I like or doesn't like what he does with the rest of the country. There's, no real reason to risk anything by disagreeing with friends, let alone, derailing a great business over it. And I don't think straight up partisan polarization is like quite the right thing, but there is a diversification that partially is political, it is good to have a diversification that's political, not partisanship. There's just two options, but a diversification. You see other things, right? You see interesting billionaires pursuing what is honestly as much performance art as it is a scientific project. Don't die as a slogan, right? But Johnson is pursuing, and publicly disclosing so much of his personal health and data. Look, that's art. That is performance art. In as much as it is science, it is role modeling as much as it is anything else. Let's put it this way, he's invented a new type of guy, right? On Twitter, you say like type of guy. Like, he invented a new type of guy. We can now meet people who you can tell, oh, you're trying to be Brian Johnson. Okay, I get you. He's not the only one doing stuff like that. Just expect
apologies. Yeah, I'll take.
Yeah. And these are what? These are packages of like personal values, ways to live, like claims about how you should evaluate epistemology. Like, I'm sure Balaji and Brian would have an immensely interesting discussion of how we can figure out what we know versus what's bullshit. If we could coax them to ignore that this will not be a popular episode and just do it for the 500 people who would watch it, I think that would be a very interesting and sophisticated discussion, right? They, of course, court much larger audiences to who, epistemology is an abstraction. But consider that Brian is doing science the way he's doing. That's like a big disagreement with like the giant medical complex. And that Balaji is like thinking about macro the way he's thinking. Well, at the very least, he probably just disagrees with the entire board of the federal, everyone who works at the Federal Reserve probably disagrees on something pretty fundamental with Balaji, right? Yeah. So this is fascinating. These guys are like, they are active minds in the world, and they are now leaving a greater and greater cultural footprint. Look, and it's not all limited to Silicon Valley, right? We truly do have, we have people arise from the social media space, like my friend Rudyard, right? He started a YouTube channel just going with fun alternative history scenarios. Eventually, the research was so good, people want him to talk about real history. If you're talking about real history, I know this very well since I did something similar. You can't help but then comment on politics, economics, the future, technology, right? And of course, that's stuff people crave and want to think about. And in a way, that's the kind of show that could never happen on television, but can happen on YouTube. So there's even the social media space globally, not just in Silicon Valley, produces it. But because the internet kind of lives in San Francisco, it gets all reflected back here to SF. You meet someone here, you might recognize them from Twitter. I'm sure people recognize you from Twitter all the time in like coffee shops and stuff, right? Yeah, that happens to me. It might also happen in LA and New York. It once happened to me at like a Seattle airport, and it happens in London occasionally. But again, this is still very like the internet is now the real world. In a few places, the real world peeks back into the physical, and parts of the physical world are part of this real world where discourse on policy, on economics, on the future of humanity, on culture, on value, on what kind of new type of guy you could be are forged. If I say, for example, if you're too online, which I know you are since I am too, about if I say Simon Saris cottagecore, you kind of know what I mean, right? It's like dropping out of the rat race, living like a picturesque life in a well-designed house you take care of, just really focusing on family and a household and running it well and running it healthy and tastefully and making it beautiful. I mean, he kind of denies creating a movement, but his photos were so good. He created a type of guy too, whether he wants to or not. And that's cultural creativity. And it's great because it gives people more ways to live and more ways to excel and build themselves up. And I think that this has been long overdue because we had this like almost winter. COVID was a cultural winter. People felt like I, by the way, said, even during the pandemic, this is on record and public record, people were saying, oh, San Francisco is dying. I'm like, no. San Francisco is still the future. The future just looks disappointing right now. Well, San Francisco didn't die. It's very much back. And the future looks less depressing. It looks pretty, in some ways, fun and exciting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The resurgence of San Francisco, part driven by COVID getting, over the COVID ending, part driven by AI sort of taking off here, and then part just by the cultural scene that we're discussing. There's sort of been this pushback on San Francisco politics that Mike Solana and others have
with pirate buyers,
yes,
or the YIMBY movement that is demanding more housing supply. Like people they're done with patience. They're like, I've been a patient Democrat for 30 years. I'm going to stay a Democrat, but I want more housing. I just want more houses. I want people to be housed.
Zuckerberg, there's an article with Zuckerberg today where he says, I'm done apologizing, right? That's kind of the new ethos of tech. Solana jokingly called it Chad maximalism, but it definitely is this sort of, more masculine alpha, just like, I'm not apologizing anymore,
But in a way, we were all human. We were all encouraged to make ourselves smaller, to make ourselves less social, to make ourselves less during COVID. I think we don't want to talk about it, but I think this is the counter reaction to that, right? And it's a very healthy one. Eric, how many house parties do we just get random invites to? And not even because we have like shows or whatever, but just because we are here and can speak like on some topics, like a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
I think people are throwing more house parties now than they ever did before COVID. And I think it's, again, the sort of like, oh my God, you can meet people in person and you can talk without needing to worry about what the whole planet will think about this one thing you said out of turn. It feels like amazing. People feel energized. They feel like hungry for socializing. And in a way, they're more social than ever before. Like the new generation of entrepreneurs, especially, I think their minds are blown that you can make friends outside and like not just be on TikTok or something. Like sounds like a joke. It sounds almost dismissive of the younger generation, but I see it. They're like, oh, this is like the first time I've had a big friend group. Like someone just told this to me, and I was like, oh, but you're like 21. Like, didn't stuff happen? Oh, of course it didn't, right? Of course it didn't. You were literally in college during COVID. It's before that you were on social media. You didn't quite fit in your high school. Oh, of course this is the first time you have a big friend group. And that's like, it's not actually sad. It's like beautiful that this happened now, because the default, unfortunately, in the modern world is that we're hyper atomized, super lonely. And the default in the past is that we were in these super coercive environments. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And yeah, and all ideas, again, they grow in a social context. Even if you're a singular thinker, you have to talk about it. You have to get resources, ideas, and information from other places.
I want to actually segue to Rudyard, because it's interesting. One, because he's 22 or somewhere around there. He's a very young guy, and I'm interested in this idea of like there's new ways for thinkers to make a living, on the internet, right? You have people like Dorkesh who would have expected, or people were telling him to go start a company. He's a smart engineer, but instead has really crafted this niche for himself it's not that niche. It's actually,
and produces these high quality technology interviews and kind of like establishment style foreign policy discourse. Yeah, which I have my nitpicks with, but I definitely respect immensely the show. I appeared on one of the early episodes.
Yeah. No, it was great. And I think you've done an interesting model too, where you are a thinker and writer yourself, but you're also a convener, and you're also a sort of consigliere or advisor to, via Bismarck, to many amazing people. So you have impact in different ways. And Rudyard's interesting because he can definitely pursue the intellectual path. He's already doing it to some degree. And he at such a young age, he has a massive following. But he also, I think, we can ask him when we bring him on, but I think he also is ambitious in other ways too, on the convening side and otherwise. So it's just interesting how different people choose to exercise their influence. And I always, enjoy playing a game of like, how does someone like Rudyard have the biggest impact possible given his skill sets and interests? And that's kind of because I'm interested in that game, that's why I ask you questions too of like, hey, what's the, sort of North Star for Palladium? What's the North Star for Bismarck? What does success look like? Because these are just new ones.
I mean, success looks like that we have a great active scientific culture in the United States. We have high state capacity, and that we have many different modes of life that people can thrive and have happy families in, if that's what they want, or have great lives of self-actualization and pursuit of excellence if they don't want a family. And, if I put it that way, it sounds pretty sensible, but the incentives of most current legacy institutions and most legacy ways of doing things are just exhausted. They can't get us more than what they already did. And in some ways, they're getting us less and less. So Palladium is it's a counter. It's a challenge. It's sort of like, the Atlantic, MIT Review, like all of you need to do better.
Yeah.
Like you did better 100 years ago for the time, or 50 years ago. Why are you bureaucratic? Why are you groupthinky? Why are you hyper-partisan? If, as a publication, you think your main impact on the world is affecting the US presidential election, you have such a tiny impact on the world, it's not even funny. Like, you should be inspiring the Stuart Brands and Steve Jobs of the future with totally different worldviews, or should be starting new cultural movements. Like, no one today has an inspiration to start a cultural movement as significant as, like, I don't know, the hippies were, for example. Even though that would be way more than a single presidential election. Well, Erik, how many presidential elections have been influenced by hippies themselves, hippies that grew up, people that hated hippies, et cetera, et cetera? Way more than an op-ed about Kamala Harris or Donald Trump could ever achieve. Yet they're selling their birthright of cultural leadership for a handful of votes. I mean, it's crazy. It's a waste. That's why I'm doing my best to build up Palladium, and hopefully I will hand it off to editor-in-chiefs in the future who feel the same way. And I wanted to solve and succeed at succession. Actually, this is a point I'm going to hijack the conversation to make. Too few people find amazing institutions they admire and step in when the previous leadership goes away and tries to build the next stage of it, the next phase of it. We have a bias in the US towards starting completely new things rather than reforming and keeping functional and working what works super well when you have the opportunity to actually be piloting it, to actually be in charge. Don't become a cog in the machine, but if you have the opportunity to step into the control room, seize it and do what is in the spirit of the mission. Don't solve the internal problems as they accumulate, all that cruft from the past. Rebuild the whole thing with the original vision and with the thing it serves well, and rebuild it well. And if you do that, that's spectacular. And we'd all be better off if 50 live players went and did what Elon did to, let's say, Twitter, to 50 American institutions. We would be in such a strong position. It's not even funny.
Yeah. It is interesting. It's like, we have a term for startups, right? Where we sort of celebrate people who start new companies, like just on principle. And that's great. I'm glad we do. I started a company that helped, more people do that. And I invest in a fund to do that. At the same time, we don't really have a celebrated term for like private equity or takeovers, right? But
no, we don't.
But we should, because we
well, when it's done right.
Yeah, we should when it's done. Like when Elon taking over Twitter, it's incredible. And there all these organizations either left to die or in the wrong hands that require people who are willing to do the dirty work of restructuring or, getting out with the old and in with the new, or saving these institutions basically. And yeah, there needs to be more sort of emphasis or celebration of that, because, we can't just create a new everything, or it's just sometimes just easier to just take something over and make it great. It already has so much infrastructure, so much, the network effect or whatever it is.
And look, we are in a time when the baby boomers have actually started to retire, or in some cases die. And there's so many of them. There's so many of them who are actually idealistic and competent. They have no idea how dysfunctional some of the other places are because they've not looked at those places very closely. But if they encounter someone who has that same spark of ambition and has clearly made it their mission to develop it, well, in that case, it is likelier than not that you might get a shot. So I think that's worth trying. And it's best to go straight to the top and not try to work your way through what is in many ways already a dated organization.
Yep. I do want to get to Bismarck too. So you outlined
Perhaps that's worth a whole episode on its own as well. Honestly, I think it is.
Totally. Oh, so yeah, maybe I could save it for its own episode, perhaps. But maybe, what's your opinion or advice to Rudyard? Like if Rudyard was saying, "Hey," came to you, which he probably is, saying, "Hey, where should I go from here? Or what path do you see is open to me?" Or like, how do you think about that? Just as an example of what young intellectuals can do.
I think that I would encourage him to write more. I think he should not underestimate, as an intellectual, the long-term returns of writing your own thoughts very clearly. Now, video essays are a valid format and an important one. But I think the truth is, for almost everyone, and especially for Rudyard, we read much faster than we listen. So even if you're listening to a podcast 2x, come on, a well-written document, you can read it faster than what you can ingest 2x on a podcast, even if it's a very high information density podcast. So the long-term compounding returns of writing, not even for a particular audience, but to clearly state down your own thoughts, evidence, and argument, that just results in de facto much more crystallized intelligence and a much deeper tradition of knowledge. People should write essays, books for themselves. And that's kind of my secret partially. A lot of what I write, I just write for myself. So I remember the research notes. Like, what did I learn about Panama? What was my most subtle thought about Panama that I was able to verify? Well, that's going to be the Bismarck Brief on Panama. Or maybe it's Ben Leno Taylor's more subtle thought on Panama, right? Or maybe it's Marko Jukic's. Either way, great to record, great to engage with deeply, great to chew on, and great to file away to be accessible later. So I think that would be a good frontier of intellectual excellence. And he's, of course, very social. So I encourage the convening function. Perhaps he should consider starting a conference of some kind. Like, wouldn't you go to the Rudyard conference of like his 20 handpicked historians or online intellectuals? And I would go to a discussion dinner. Yeah. And then what is the result of that? Well, would you want Mark Zuckerberg to go? I mean, yeah, probably Mark Zuckerberg would like to go at some point, maybe off the record or maybe on the record. I don't know. But I think people underestimate how much interestingness, novelty, and excellence can be rewarded with attention, but also like a decent set of contacts. Because many of the people who are shaping society at its frontiers, they just deeply crave someone to have thought through the problems they're dealing with. Because the problems are coming them at an unfathomable velocity. Like, since we mentioned Mark several times, let's point out, what is Mark Zuckerberg dealing with? Well, he's just dealing with, the implications of virtual reality mass addiction, the implications of social media censorship. Oh, yeah, of course, how best to develop AI and compete with Elon Musk and Sam Altman, and running a huge company with like cutthroat top corporate America executives trying to hack his brain. It's like, that's like 20 different intellectual areas with he's grappling at the frontier of unsolved problems. And oh, by the way, he's also become a health bro. And, he had to solve that as well. He had to like figure out how not to slouch and like be embodied and fight and be healthy and happy and make his wife happy and be a good dad and all of that. So it's like, okay, should he read Palladium Magazine? Yeah, of course he should. He should read Palladium Magazine. He should talk to Rudyard. He should go to Rudyard's conference if Rudyard throws one. He should go to Hereticon. It would help him with all of these things because they're unsolved problems. Everything from the seemingly trivial of like literally how to have a family to how to do science to how to deal with government and not just censor things for power that is short-sighted, right? That will destroy society.
Well, on the note, we're at the hour, but I just want to leave you also with a cliffhanger for a future episode we'll do is Turpentine wants to get into publication business as well, more from a business and investing angle. But to your point, the written word gets something that podcasts don't, and it also just attracts an expanded audience. So I'm definitely inspired by the notion, and we can get into it on a future episode where we can get into Bismarck and we get into Turpentine, our own respective businesses.
I would love that.
Perfect. We'll do that for next episode. Although we also have Rudyard coming back tomorrow, so that'll be great as well. Well, another way of the hour. Let's wrap here. Samo, this is a great discussion on Palladium and Silicon Valley intellectual culture. And as always, until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Live Players. Please subscribe, leave a review, and check out Samo's excellent newsletter, The Bismarck Brief, for more rigorous analysis of key individuals, institutions, or industries. Live Players is a production of Turpentine, the podcast network behind Econ 102 with Noah Smith and Moment of Zen. Hey everyone, Erik here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at erikaturpentine.co. That's ERIK at turpentine.co, and let's partner together.